Do you want to use your digital amp at the same time as your tube amp?
Or at the same time as your transistor amp?
Yes? Then you need to know this.
You're laughing because you're perceiving a difference?
I am. It's not as dramatic as this, but it's like a wah went on.
Yeah. Our peaks and troughs are not aligned. That's latency. 1 or 2 thousandth of a second. Who can hear that?
Hey everyone, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here, hello. Right, first and foremost, please subscribe.
And please head to thatpedalshowstore.com and grab some merch. It is the main way we fund the show.
Fantastic, right. Dan's got a story to tell about Joe Bonamassa and something that's happened, but outside of that, this is a question we get asked all the time. So let's lay it out, explain it, and get into it.
Absolutely. Joe Bonamassa has just shared a picture on the Instagrams of his new touring rig, his amps, and they are Joe Bonamassa's signature Tone Master Series high-powered twins. And why is that unusual?
Because it's a digital amp. Joe is well known for his Dumbles, his 100-watt Marshalls, his high-powered Tweed Twins, and he's using these Tone Master digital amps. We want to say right from the top, right, this video is not a slight on digital amps. And just to prove that it's not a slight on digital amps, we've got a Quilter transistor amp as well. The point about using the Quilter is that it is, like the tube amp, 100% analog. It has no DSP in it.
Correct.
The problem we're going to get into and the solutions we're going to get into in how you get around doing this is all to do with when the digital amp adds latency.
Correctamundo. Now, Mick and I were at the Royal Albert Hall a couple of years ago with Joe.
Indeed.
And he took us through his rig and it was extraordinary. And one of the things that Joe does is he adds amplifiers to sort of give him more headroom and more El Grunjo. And it's an extraordinary thing. So what happens when we take that sort of approach on top of a digital amplifier?
Yeah, you'll have seen us demonstrate it many times on That Pedal Show, and we're going to go through it now. The fundamentals of using two analog amplifiers together. We're going to demonstrate that right now. And just to say, you know, there's quite a lot of comments from people saying no one uses two amplifiers. Well, all our favourite players use two amps, at least, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly when they're able to. And it's something that we would advocate you try, not just for more volume, but for more interesting sound, for wet dry, blah, blah, blah. Let's not bang that drum.
Okay.
Let's start then. Okay, what you see behind you is a Fender Deluxe Reverb. You see a Boss Katana. And I want to say it's the 100 because it's got a 100-watt setting.
Oh, no. Okay, excellent.
We've chosen the Katana very deliberately because it is the best-selling amp, as far as we're aware, of pretty much the last 10 years.
Yeah.
In terms of amplifier, speaker in one box.
Yep.
And on the other side of the Katana, you'll see a Quilter Aviator Cub. Now, Quilter famously makes all analog, or I think they're all analog. This one is all analog solid state amplifier, transistor amp. So we deliberately haven't chosen two tube amps. Let's begin.
Yes.
And what you're going to hear is the Deluxe Reverb.
Yeah, great.
Yeah?
Yep.
Here's the Quilter. Very nice,
Beautiful.
bit more reverb in the Quilter, so I've turned it up in the Deluxe. Now, as Dan plays the Quilter, I'm going to turn on the Deluxe Reverb. First thing we do when we ever use two amps together, we check the phase alignment, all right, the polarity. So we're going to flip the polarity of the quilter 180 degrees. You're not going to hear a lot of highly inspired, intricate guitar playing today because it's about the theory, right, and the practice of this. Maybe we'll play a bit at the end. What you will have heard, what did they hear, Dan?
You'll have heard the bottom end. One thing about when the two amplifiers are in phase, the bottom end couples, and it creates this beautiful wall. When the amplifiers are out of phase, you're getting a lot of frequency cancellation. And you really hear it in the bottom end. So it's one thing to listen out for when you are correcting the phase and you're flipping the polarity of that phase. You really hear it in the bottom end. And it was immediately obvious that everything just came back.
Yeah.
It was louder.
Now, what's interesting about that, the recording chain for these two amplifiers is exactly the same, right? So there's everything in this chain is analog. The amplifier is analog, the microphone is analog, the recording chain is analog. Mm-hmm. Everything before it hits the computer is analog, right? So what we'll do now is we'll go investigate, looking at waveforms, exactly what we've just heard. Here we are there in audio production land. What you'll see, I've got the screen recording, and you'll see on the right here is all the input side of it. This is everything that happens in the Universal Apollo sound card. This is our recording screen for the guitars we've just recorded. And as you can see on these two lines that we've got here, we've got the three lines, the quilter, the katana, the deluxe reverb. We didn't use the katana, so no audio file apart from a bit of spill from the other amps. The deluxe reverb, we heard it first. Here, let me just pull this out a bit. We heard the deluxe reverb first, then we heard the quilter, then we added the deluxe reverb in the quilter. So what's going to be interesting about this is, let's hear the deluxe reverb. So we'll start off, we'll just mute the voice mics because we don't want to hear them. We don't want to hear what's coming out of the katana, and I'm going to turn the room mics off as well because we don't want to listen to them right now. Here is the deluxe reverb. Here's the quilter. Please don't make too many I like the sound of that, I don't like the sound of that judgments. Obviously we can change EQ, we can do all of that, but we're not talking about EQ here, we're talking about polarity and phase. Now, when we turn the deluxe reverb on, the amps came on 180 degrees out of phase. The polarity was flipped, right? And if you look at these waveforms, I'll just make them bigger so you can really see it. You can see very clearly, very, very clearly indeed, that when this one goes down, that one goes up. Vice versa. That one goes up, that one goes down. But you can also see, just make this big so you can see it, that they start and end in exactly the same place, right? Where this waveform goes up and that one goes down, they're in the same place. That means they are phase aligned, right? They're hitting the recorder at the same time. Now, it gets really interesting. Stick with it. At some point here, we flip the phase on one of the amps. Can't remember which one it is, but we'll see that in a minute. So look, here we're still out of phase, we're still out of phase, we're still out of phase, because when that one goes down, that one goes up. Opposing polarity, should I say. Let's get our terminology correct. And at some point in a minute, I don't quite know where it is, I hit that little button on the humdinger and it flips one of the amps 180 degrees, right? I found the point where we flip the polarity. So what you're going to hear is you'll hear the two amps opposing polarity. And then when we flip the switch, you'll hear the polarity come the same, and after that I'll show you what that looks like in the waveform. So here we go. Now that recorded sound is incredibly more dramatic than the difference in sound we heard in the room. And if you look at the waveforms, guess what? Here we are, look, very clearly opposing polarity where I've got this cursor, right? You can see down, up. And then at some point the magic button gets switched. Come on. Okay, somewhat annoyingly, I flipped it right as the signal was tailing off. So what you see is the peaks and troughs are a little bit smaller. But you can quite clearly see that here we've got a down and an up. And then I flip the switch there, right? A down and an up. And by there, we've got two ups, right? And now you can see these peaks and troughs are aligned. So we know now that those two sounds are phase aligned, and if you hear it again, you'll hear it very clearly. And when Dan and I bang on about phase all the time, about why you need to have your two amps correctly polarity aligned, that's why, because we're dealing with two amps in the analog sphere. Now, let's add the katana.
Fascinating.
Good, back in the room. I hope that explained it. Right.
You can see it so clearly, right?
If the screen recording has worked.
Yeah, but it's like, but I loved that because like, okay, there it is.
Yeah.
They're out of phase, flip the polarity, in phase.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Peaks and troughs in the same place. That's how you know. Okay. What we're going to do now is start in exactly the same place. We're going to hear the quilter and the deluxe reverb again. I'm going to remove the jack plug from the quilter and I'm going to plug it into the Boss. So nothing has changed, right? Nothing has changed. It is going down a different channel strip so that it can go into a different line on the recording machine.
Yep.
But it's all analog. There's no digital schmigital going on in the recording line.
Correct. Okay.
Groovy, Daniel?
Groovacious. So the two amps together.
You're laughing because you're perceiving a difference?
I am.
What difference are you perceiving?
Well, it's not as dramatic as this, but it's like a wah went on.
Yeah.
And all of the lovely, I love the bottom end of that. And then that was, shall we say, cuckolded. I don't know a better word for it.
Nice.
But something moved.
Let's do it in reverse then. So I'll have Dan play maybe something slightly different and I'll do it the other way. We'll start in the katana and then go to the quilter. As he keeps playing, I'm going to go back to the katana and we're going to flip the polarity.
Yep.
I've got a prediction to make.
Go on.
One of those polarities is closer to being correct than the other. The
Yes,
first one.
The first one is closer to being correct, I agree.
But it's not correct.
It's not correct.
Back to the computer. Here we are again. I hope this is a giant widescreen thing, so I hope it's visible. Maybe I'll zoom in and around it so you can see what's going on. Anyway, there we go. We come to the katana, right? We started off with the quilter and the deluxe reverb, and as we would expect, we're going to see these peaks and troughs in the same place because they're in polarity, right? Just get to the end of that section where we swapped it over. The first section where we swapped it over was here. So here you go. These two lines here are the quilter and the deluxe reverb, and the one in the middle is the katana, right? So before I swapped it, peaks and troughs in the same place, okay? Sorry to keep hammering that home, but it's important. In comes the katana. Oh dear. Let's get a slightly bigger one so you can see it more clearly as Dan hits a nice big transient, or at least plays anything at all. Right, look, our peaks and troughs are not aligned. That's latency. Here's how it sounds. Myth number one, no one can hear a few milliseconds of digital latency. If you can't hear that, you don't have ears. So that's our problem, right? That's our problem. We're going to go and solve it in there. Before we do, I'll show you two ways you can solve it. So for recorded music, this is somewhat less of a problem because you can fix it, right? You can fix it in the recording software, and we can do that two ways. First of all, just going to save this. First of all, we can take our we could shift the digital sound back. We could do that, or we could shift the analog sound forward so that they're phase aligned. Way number one, we can physically grab the waveform. Let's try and get something a bit more obvious so I can see a bit more clearly. And we can move it, right? We can go, here are two troughs. Let's get it nice and big so you can see. Here are two troughs that should be aligned. We can pick this one up and we can move it so that they are aligned. Now, if you listen to them now, it should be a lot better than it was before. I'll just move it back. It's night and day, right? It's absolutely night and day. That's one way. The second way is you could add a plugin. So let's say we had a sample delay plugin, which we do. We can delay it by a number of samples or milliseconds. I'll delay it by, let's say, 2 milliseconds, and we'll see what that does. Oh, just get back to that nice bit of playing. So fair play to the katana. It looks like its latency is somewhere between 1 and 2 milliseconds, which is 1 or 2 thousandth of a second. Who can hear that? You can't hear it on its own, but when it's mixed with another signal, you can. All right, so hopefully that explains what happens when you, in fact, let's go back to the studio.
And that is digital latency.
Yeah, quite clearly there in waveform form. And so for anyone who over the years has got a bit tired of me and Dan banging on about latency and why it's so important, that's why. I think it's pretty fair to say that 1 or 2 milliseconds latency with a mono signal, if you were plugging straight into your katana, is going to be
imperceptible.
All but imperceptible to the
agreed.
vast majority of humans. So it doesn't matter if you're using your katana on its own, or your Kemper, or your Quad Cortex,
or your high-powered Tweed Twin Tone Master,
a la Bonamassa. It does matter if you're trying to mix it with a purely analog signal. Now, let's talk about some practicalities before we move on. First of all, Dan, you've seen this in real life with Biffy Clyro.
I have. It's fascinating.
What happened there?
Simon was using his real amps, and he had a modeling amplifier for certain parts of certain songs. And so they'd taken sounds from the studio that he wanted to be able to reproduce as close as possible, for certain things.
Yeah, so it sounded like the album.
So it sounded like the album.
Yeah.
The issue is when he kicked those on with his real amps, it didn't sound like the album.
Yeah.
And they worked and worked and worked. And the sound guy, the way they solved it was that they had to delay the analog signal. They had to delay it by the same amount that the digital signal's latency.
Which is exactly what we just did when we were sat at the computer, right? We delayed the analog signal. So in a live environment then, if you're playing, or in a recording environment, doesn't really matter, there's a couple of obvious questions that always come up.
Mm-hmm.
One is surrounding the fact that there is a time delay with distance anyway, and it is somewhere around 3 milliseconds per meter.
Right.
To do with the speed of sound. So actually, the latency in the katana is less than being 1 meter further away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Dumb, obvious question number one, and this has been asked, couldn't you just move the mic further away from the amp?
And I do love this question. But when you think about it, it's like, yes, let's change the latency from the original amplifier.
It would fix the latency.
It would fix the latency.
On the katana.
You're talking about moving a mic at least that far away from the amplifier.
Well, two problems. One, it would sound shit because it would be too far from the speaker. Two, it would also get the spill of all the other amps.
That's right.
So no, you can't do that. Same, and I have heard this as well. I genuinely have heard this. Could you just move the amp back a meter?
Same problem.
No. And then a slightly more logical question is, what difference then does it make if you're in the auditorium? Because, if you go to a big gig, they'll use all kinds of clever maths to calculate the delay that needs to happen between the front speakers by the stage, the ones halfway back down the room, and the ones halfway back down the room again. Because if you're sat in the back row, you're going to be hearing the sound of the front speakers, the sound of the middle speakers, and the sound of the back speakers, especially if you're in a stadium. So it's important that they delay them.
That's right. If you think about the speed of sound,
yeah.
If the signal is hitting all those three speakers at once, you're getting that time delay twice, and it's all mixing together. It sounds garbled. So what they need to do is, by the time the speakers at the front of the stage go, and then that sound hits the middle speakers, so they delay the middle sound enough so that when it hits that, they're all together, phase aligned, and then the back speakers, so that you get this lovely big wall of sound.
Yeah,
everything is aligned.
By the time you get back 50 meters in a big venue, like a stadium, it's quite a significant delay. Anyway, the actual point of mentioning it is that is a different game than the game we're playing here.
Correct.
Because what is coming out of those two amplifiers needs to be in phase.
At the source.
At the source. Otherwise, you're just repeating that phase alignment all the way down the room. Finally, always someone that says, hey, I really like the out of phase sound. Great. If you do, good. It's a cool thing. You can use it for effect. Is it what we want to start with? No. Is it?
It really isn't. And it's one thing to flip the polarity and be out of phase like that, and that happens with pickups,
guitars,
and you get that, and that's like, yep, that's really cool. But that's the polarity. That's when everything's aligned, as Mick was going through before, and you've got the opposite peaks and troughs. I can't even do it like this. When we flip the polarity and we put things perfectly in phase, then everything's coupled together. It sounds magic. When you delay what happens is you get this comb filtering, and because it's a time-based delay, phase misalignment, shall we say, as we saw when we flipped that, one will sound a bit better than the other, but it doesn't matter. You can't fix it by just flipping that phase.
I don't think I actually showed that in the last example, but what you'll see is that one is slightly closer phase aligned than the other, but they're still both out.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say, back to the original question, let's say you do want to use your Katana with an analog amp. Let's take the Deluxe Reverb out of the game, because we want to make the point again, this is not about hating on digital, and it's not about tube amp snobbery, right? It's just not that.
No. So
we'll use the Quilter and the Boss, and we'll prove the point with the Deluxe and the Boss at the end. What can you do then to mitigate this, given that you don't have, when you go and play your gig down the pub, you don't have Logic running in the back end?
So the only way to do it is to delay the analog amplifier by the same amount as the latency in the digital amplifier. Now, we've got a pedal set up here, the Free the Tone, which will give us 1 millisecond in increments.
And it will kill the dry sound as well. We'll explain that in a minute.
Yep. The issue with this is that we can get it a lot closer, but actually when we're looking at, we can say if the Katana was definitely 2 milliseconds or definitely 3 milliseconds, then we're in with a chance. But if it's 2.7 milliseconds
or 1.7
or 1.7 or whatever, then we're getting closer, but we're not exactly there.
Yeah, I mean, and to what degree of milliseconds is discernible? Well, let's find out. So we'll set the Free the Tone will be hitting the analog amp only. So in this case, it's hitting the Quilter. Is that right?
That's correct. This? Yeah, that's exactly right.
So our first job, well, we know they're never going to be perfectly phase aligned, because we know they're not. So we're going to get the one that's closest.
Okay, yep.
Yep. Flip the polarity. We're using this device here, which is a Gig Rig Humdinger. It's affecting the polarity on
the isolated output 2.
The isolated output 2.
That's right. Now, it doesn't really, what we're talking about is a relationship between the two signals. So we can flip the polarity on either one, we get the same result.
So now we know, because we looked at it earlier, because of the Boss's digital latency, its waveform is delayed because it has 1 or 2 milliseconds of delay. So let's delay the Quilter by 1 or 2 milliseconds. Before we do that, it's currently set up to have 150 millisecond slap delay, just to put you in the idea of what is the difference between 150 milliseconds and 1 millisecond.
Perfect.
That's 150 milliseconds. Now what we're going to do is kill the dry sound. So we don't want to hear the dry sound. We only want to hear the delayed sound at 150 milliseconds.
What do we have now? We have wet dry.
A brilliant wet dry slapback. Actually, that's one way you can use your Boss Katana with your analog amplifier. You can kill the dry sound. That's one way you can do it.
Yeah.
And have wet effects only. Different conversation, which we'll come on to in a minute. Okay, now as he plays, I'm going to reduce the 150 down to 1 millisecond, and you'll be able to hear what happens. quite hard to discern here in the room the differences you're going to hear in the recording, but it seemed to me that 1 millisecond was the best compromise.
Yeah. But it's somewhere between 1 and 2.
Yeah, so what I was doing there, as I was turning the pedal on and off, when the pedal got turned on, we killed the dry sound. So you're only hearing the delayed sound. When I turned the pedal off, I turned the dry sound back on, so you're hearing both amps again. Otherwise, it would kill the dry in the other amp. Here we are again then, one final time. Let's see what was happening there. So let's zoom in on this audio. This is where we've got the quilter and the katana. And we've got the 150 millisecond delay on. That's what 150 milliseconds of delay looks like. That we had the delay on the quilter, right? Which is why the waveform is after. So if we hear that, we'll hear the 150 millisecond delay. Okay, good. And we got kill dry on, so we're only hearing the delayed signal. That's where I start to change it. I think I asked Dan to do it again because I asked him to just play a bit more definitely so that we could really hear it wasn't too much in the background. So you can hear I've gone down from 150 milliseconds to 1 millisecond. And let's see what that looks like in the jobbies here. Yeah, we're out. So it's almost directly in between. So that's why you're hearing that phasey comb filtery thing. And then I think somewhere around there I tried 2 milliseconds and 3 milliseconds if memory serves. What you can hear there is I was swapping between dry signal present without the delay on, so the original phase relationship, and then turn the delay pedal on and turn the dry signal off, so we're hearing only the 1 millisecond delay. And what you can hear is neither of them are in. So let's just prove that by adding a sample delay to the quilter, and we should, because I can go in 0.01 of a millisecond here, we should be able to get them in phase. Let's just have a look at what it looks like. So you can hear the phase relationship changing, where I'm going through half a millisecond, and you can hear all that comb filtering and the phasing thing happening. So I'm just going to stop because we're trying to fix something that just sounds bad, and we don't want to fix it in the mix, so we don't want to do that. Let's repeat that using the 2 analog amps.
Okay, nice. Oh, we're going to push one of them further into latency. That's great. So they'll start perfectly aligned.
Well, depending on where the polarity is currently.
Yeah, so let's
check the polarity.
Check that. Instantly, I can say that's out of phase.
So, another really important point. We've used these 2 amps and then these 2 amps. Well, guess what? This one's not the same phase as those 2 was.
Yeah.
So it's important to check every single time, right? Polarity, should I say. Okay. Go for it then, Dan.
Okay.
And we're going to introduce 1 millisecond of latency to the Fender.
That's wild.
Point proven.
That's wild.
Point proven.
Wow.
We hope that that explains two things. One, why Dan and I get so handbag about digital latency and running 2 amps at once, or 2 of any signal for that matter.
And this is not us saying digital amps are bad.
No.
Absolutely not. It's just physics.
Yeah.
Because there is processing, it takes an amount of time.
And if you want to fix it, you have to delay the analog signal. Now, there's one more question that gets asked all the time. What if I have my sound on stage, be it digital or analog, and I send out a separate digital signal to front of house?
Load box or, IRs, whatever that is.
Captor, Raptor, Shapter, UAOX, anything you might have that sends a digital signal. Is that then causing me this real bad phase problem? Well, no, because it's not happening at source. So you're not putting 2 things right next to each other and miking them up, making the same sound. That is when your room distances and all of that make much less of a difference.
Yeah.
Much better to have it in phase, but it's not going to be such a big problem if it's not.
Mick and I love using 2 amplifiers, and one of the things we do is we use a wet-dry rig, where we have our wet signals on one side and dry on both, right? But it's really important, and one reason we bang on about analog-dry-through all the time is that the same rules apply. So I've got the Boss DD3T and the Eventide H9, and they're in this little thing here that I can switch between them. They're both only going to one amplifier. Okay.
And the important part of this is dry signal is present in both amplifiers. That's the important thing about analog dry-through. The dry signal is present in both amplifiers.
That's correct. And everything is lovely and phase aligned now. Now, when I kick on the Boss, sounds perfect. Kick on the H9.
So let's hear the difference recorded. You all have already heard this, right? Because it's in the video, but I'm doing this just to check for myself. Let's hear the difference between the Eventide with no analog dry-through and the Boss with analog dry-through. I'll just mute the katana. I mean, that last example just nails it on. That's why pedals have to have analog dry-through if you're going to use them wet-dry with the dry signal present in both. Case closed, my lad. Mate, that's fascinating. We talk about this all the time. We get our knickers in a twist about it. We get completely handbaggy about it.
We do.
And quite rightly, given the confusion out there, a lot of you go, no one can hear 1 millisecond difference. I think we proved beyond any reasonable doubt, my lad, that you absolutely can, with the caveat that you're using 2 amps together and the dry signal is present in both.
Yes.
It's really important.
Yep. So, Joe, if you want to use your Dumble in conjunction with your Tone Masters, you need to work out what the latency is of the Tone Masters and put that delay into your Dumble so everything gets phase aligned, and then it will sound magic.
We hope you've already worked that out.
Yes, I'm sure you have.
All right, good.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and massive thank you to anyone that's gone to thatpedalshowstore.com.
Indeed, please go there, buy merch. That's how we keep the show on the air. Thanks to the preferred retailers, Andertons and Pedal Empire. And also thank you to our patrons on Patreon. You also help keep the show on the air, for which we're extremely grateful.
Fabulous. Okay.
I can't wait to read the comments. You ninnies, you don't understand this. We do. We do. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.